Persona franchise is often praised for its slice of life and human elements that blend seamlessly into fantastical adventures with otherworldly threats. However, something that is seldom mentioned is how much horror litters this franchise. I feel that more often than not, it's often forgotten that at the end of the day, each game is about a group of youths that are thrust into the conflicts of lurking gods that would use them as instruments to further their personal gain, children that build pacts with these demonic forces just to stand a chance at surviving, a world that seemingly on a subconscious level seeks to purge itself. Today join me as I discuss some of the most terrifying set pieces found throughout the series.
Pandora's welcome.
How about we start from the beginning? The final dungeon in the first Persona game has you trek through a video world. A video world is a hellscape that festers beneath the school that served you as a safe haven for a majority of the game. The deeper you travel through its labyrinthian halls, you begin to realize just how abstract the imagery is. These walls could be made of flesh, webs, bones. It's hard to say, but as you push on through the oppressive atmosphere, things start to become claustrophobic. You find yourself winding around an enormous maze. It's the final stretch, and behind this red door, you're greeted by this. A perversion of Maki, the secondary protagonist of the adventure. She's revealed to you this mass of flesh that resembles a body, surrounded by contorted limbs with a neck that ends with lips, and what appears to be a child's buttocks. To top everything off, the most unsettling facet is Maki's face, perfectly undisturbed amidst the abomination she's attached to. This deep into the adventure, you already know that everything is the result of Maki's split psyche. It can only cause one to wonder why her shadow, that being Pandora, would adopt this form. It leaves me personally to wonder what kind of potential subdued trauma she may have suffered that we just never saw. The thoughts that must be plaguing her mind to cause this to be the outcome will likely forever remain a mystery. All of these things only add to my unease whenever I have to bear witness to this part of Maki's consciousness.
Teddie, who are you?
What can we definitively say we know about Teddie? He's a shadow. We can also say that he can manifest a human body. It would also seem he's capable of bringing people back to life. And Teddie, this shadow, somehow also has a shadow?
What is that I see in your eyes? Inescapable fear?
No matter what I learn about him, and no matter how many times I replay through Persona 4, I feel that I never get any closer to understanding what Teddie truly is. And with the small sample size of things we do know about him, it's clear that he's way more than just a stray shadow. Teddie holds this intense agency to ally with you and your party. When you get to the point in the story where you have to confront Shadow Teddie as you have all your other party members, you're greeted by this. A withered and hollowed out husk of a beast with eerie, piercing, multicolored eyes that seem to emulate the lens of a camera, watching. With the knowledge that shadow selves are very much a part of the real person, it only adds another layer of unease and mystery to Teddie. In more immediate interaction with him, we see him behave cheerfully, excitable, and silly to the point where he's comic relief. But his shadow, it just flips everything. He's articulate, jaded, and disillusioned, and almost as nihilistic as the game's main villain. I've always just came to the conclusion he may just be some sort of lingering eldritch being. The most logical conclusion is that he may somehow be a Sagiri. Of what origin, I can't say. I just feel like that bizarre eye design is not a coincidence, especially with how much overlap there tends to be with it. The strangest thing is that even after powering through his pretty tough battle, I could never quite shake the feeling that Teddie in particular feels the most like he's putting on an act. Every other investigation team member's shadow will act out in extreme, scaling to their counterparts' desires. However, they never completely alter their intelligence. And of every shadow, I'd say this one feels the most different to the point that I'd say it's easily the most bizarre encounter in the game. I can never in good faith say that Teddie is just a shadow because everything about him is too different. And I always find myself back thinking, Teddie, who are you?
Permanent scars.
Trauma can and will lead people to irrational trains of thought, thoughts that can push blame and guilt onto the wrong person, even if that person is yourself. But what if all that self resentment, all that guilt, and all the blame bottles up with nowhere to go? What if all of these things had a face? This encounter is truly frightening. Similar to Shadow Teddie, the likeness of Shadow Eri is almost one-to-one with her normal human counterpart, except here we see a smile that looks like it was carved in by a knife. Her right eye remains covered, and it remains consistent with the fact that the real-world Eri, while her injuries are permanent, they're really a part of her. These injuries are also reflected in her rebel design. Here, her leg is seemingly some sort of prosthetic, and her eye is once again covered by her hair. In the real world, this is where her bandage would be. All of this stuff comes together, and it's both scary and immensely tragic. It's the psychological manifestation of a victim of a truly vicious assault. One that is forever etched into both of our minds, us and Toshiro. Persona 5 Tactica, at the end of the day, is a spin off known for its very cutesy and anime style. But, honestly, this has to be the most gruesome portrayal of an assault victim I've seen in any Atlas game. But then again, many would say that horror is most effective when you least expect it.
Scrap metal.
I'm sure that many people have thought to themselves that being trapped inside of a school would be a pretty scary scenario. Now imagine your friends are with you. Less scary, right? Okay, but imagine now that they're all being hostile towards you and trying to weaponize your insecurities against you while also attempting to instigate a fight. These things are all present in Persona 4 Arena, but they are far from the scariest thing that could be found inside of this game. Within the main scenario, to me the scariest piece of storytelling lies solely in one location: the Dead Factory. I can't mince words. I find this stage truly disturbing. Before the announcement room even warps into this monstrosity, it's already unnerving enough seeing that it appears you're being watched. There's a control center with cameras monitoring everyone. That alone gives the space an invasive quality. After Labris falls victim to denying her shadow, we get taken directly to where the root of her torment takes place. The Dead Factory is a grisly reminder of fratricide, violence, and psychological torture, and especially manipulation. You see, Labra stepping out of line with her programming developed a heart. However, in her finding a heart, her creators were unswayed. What the team needed was the perfect anti-shadow weapon. Labris was looking like the progress that they needed into furthering this goal. The Kirijo Foundation needed this battle data. So, they used mind control on her sister and hatched a scheme to force Labris into murdering her. She had already killed many of her sisters, but the difference here was this one she developed with. This unit, this sister, was here when she had developed feelings of being more than just a robot. This cold, empty room draped in deep reds, accompanied by countless humanoid animatronic legs and torsos. Knowing how robots are in the series, you just know that they're human, and seeing it feels all wrong. In my opinion, this is the most first-hand exposure we get into the more underworld side of the Kirijo group and their more twisted methods. Their unethical practices really makes me have to remember sometimes that humans can be more heartless and ruthless than any monster, even the monsters that may wish to harm us. Time is one of the most understated elements of when you think of things that are scary. But even something as simple as adding a timer visual can shake us to our core. When December arrives in Persona 3, everything in the atmosphere changes. The calendar up to this point has counted down towards confrontations with countless moon shadows, but this is completely different. What you know is waiting for you at the end of this month is death. Death itself. Nyx has a truly haunting design. For starters, her pale face contrasts with her pitch black palette. She descends elegantly despite her enormous size, making her presence even more imposing. Even more unsettling, upon further inspection, you'll begin to notice something. Look deeper into her face. You'll notice that it's still very much your friend Ryoji, and in a literal sense, the true Ryoji. Nyx is a force of nature, and this reflects even in her battle dialogue. There's no sense of malice, no rage or spite, just a creature forged by humanity's wish to end the cycle of life, and permanently be whisked away into oblivion. An oblivion devoid of life's complications, an oblivion devoid of suffering. All of these things alone are horrifying, but I feel the extent of Nyx's terror remains with this imagery. This final bit of imagery. Though Nyx has been delayed by the seal, it has come at the cost of his sacrifice. This is the image of what at the end of the day is a kid that chose to siphon off his life to preserve the lives of his friends. His expression is difficult to pinpoint at times. Is it a satisfied smile? Sometimes it seems like that to me, but other times I can't help but shake that he looks almost tormented. The true terror in all of this is that this seal doesn't mean that Nyx is staved off forever, and she sure isn't dead. You see, we all know that Nyx can't die, and that also means she has an infinite amount of time before something can disturb the seal or possibly destroy it, in which case it would be safe to assume that her march would just continue on. The march to the destruction of man would only resume. After all, with eternity being the pool of time she has to work with, this mortal seal would only seem like a I guess it would only seem like a detour towards. In the last video, I established that Persona is no stranger to horror. The franchise excels at a lot, and a lot of other elements go under the radar, so I was very happy to be able to shine a light on an aspect of this series that I truly admire. I shared quite a few examples in the last video of horror in the series, but the truth is that these are not one-off instances. There's still plenty to discuss, and I'm gonna start right now.
Darkest of suns.
I would be willing to say music is the single most iconic element of the Persona titles. I would argue this also goes beyond the music being simply catchy. Music is often used to directly contextualize themes, and at times, the music can serve as a monologue. Episode 14 of Persona 5 the Animation introduced the theme Dark Sun, a melancholic song that's easy to assume is from the perspective of Goro Akechi. I have a question. Is it wrong to pity Goro Akechi? I've come to the conclusion he's irredeemable. An egomaniacal murderer that will stop at nothing to fulfill his own selfish ambition, for bloodlust and vengeance. To be honest, even aside from his horrific deeds on a human level though, I can pity him. While looking through the lens of him having to be abandoned by his father at birth, and also considering he had to live past his mother's suicide as a kid, it's understandable in a way that without either parental figure, it would lead him to not being able to develop a way to cope. And I want to emphasize that even though I don't believe he's worthy of forgiveness, I can just pity him. Now back on the topic of Dark Sun. It seems to ruminate on his horrific acts on what must have been countless murders in the grand scheme of things. Not to mention, the song will often shift to a melancholic regret when he pontificates that he's too far gone, and questions if he's too much of a monster to be saved. The song really is a haunting piece about a tortured soul really praying for a new path and hoping to find a new light. It also contains a chilling acknowledgement of being on the losing side of the fight. And all of these things are not why I chose to include Dark Sun in this discussion. You see, the disturbing thing about Dark Sun is the immediate imagery we get from the intro itself towards the end. You see, this song is introduced not long after Makoto Nijima is introduced during her arc with Kaneshiro. This all becomes relevant because I and many others have realized that this intro may be showing us a glimpse into the bad timeline, one of the game over timelines to be specific. A glimpse into the consequences if the Phantom Thieves were to fail. Now, I'm gonna let you guys know right now, there's gonna be a content warning. if the Phantom Thieves had failed to successfully steal Kanashiro's heart, things could have ended up really bad. The glimpses we get to see into this timeline show the Phantom Thieves as victims, in particular victims of human trafficking. You see, Kanashiro is often dubbed to be a weak villain, but I don't think people understand the stakes that were on the line when encountering him. I've always strongly disagreed. He's disgusting, he's conniving, he's greedy, and most of all, he's heartless. Kanashiro would do anything for money. It's horrible enough he had threatened Makoto with making Sai Nijima one of his personal concubines. It's also bad enough he said he would force her into trafficking. But what's exceedingly disturbing about Kanashiro is that he doesn't care if you're a kid. He'll find a place in the market for you too, as he showed with Makoto in his dialogue. And with how hyper-focused he is with profits, he admitted he would only need to kill one or two Phantom Thieves to get a message across. The truth is, he's so disgusting, he sees them as an asset to utilize for more money. In these few shots, we see Anne, Ryuji, and Makoto nude. But if you slow down even just a little bit on Makoto's shot, you'll notice she's on a bed, and yeah. I definitely don't need to go further on this, but it's always unsettled me because the opening is mostly standard fare, and then at the tail end it shoves all these almost snuff film-esque sequences and shots. It's very odd, and seeing this made me realize this may be the most scary fail state in any Persona game. The worst game over possible for anyone. It's truly disturbing.
Those pearly gates.
Persona 4 is often considered the most lighthearted amongst its peers. Personally, I've never really saw it that way, but a glance at Nanako's dungeon Heaven, you'd be forgiven to think this is just another zany romp in an anime-style JRPG. But everyone that's played this game knows that Heaven is the single dungeon you want to get over with the most. You see, there's no soaking in this wonderland because at every turn, the stakes remind you why you're here. The life of your 7-year-old cousin is in jeopardy. The whole time you're here, you see her innocence front and center. This little girl who had her mother's life stripped away from her. A child that, due to the loss of her mother, has pondered mortality harder than any child should ever have to. The thought of heaven has given her solace that her mother is in a better place. So it's pretty sad that this is the place that her mind goes to once you enter what's in her immediate conscience. It's just so natural that she would imagine such a gorgeous place. Huge trees, rainbows, enormous gates. But as I said, there is zero time to soak any of this in. Namatame, in an act of extremism, takes it upon himself to try to save Nanako, not knowing the repercussions. You see, being in the shadow world is taxing on anyone, especially on the first time. But Nanako, she's a child. The atmosphere alone is dangerous for her. Not to mention, God forbid, a shadow coming across her could just be catastrophic. The pressure is already on, and it doesn't help that you're wandering this maze that seems almost endless. At every turn, you hope to see Nanako, hear something, anything, that will clue you into where she is, but it keeps going. The song playing, Heaven, is this smooth, catchy track that helps ease the nerves, at least until you understand the lyrics. These lyrics are about this lonely girl's day-to-day life, about how she feels abandoned, how this girl replays memories over and over about her deceased mother, and how she copes with the music she hears, presumably from the TV, with her father being obsessed with finding the culprit responsible for the hit and run with her mother. It's sad to say the closest thing this poor girl had to family for a long time before you got there probably was just a television. The horror that lies in Heaven is that, depending on how things are handled after all these events, her life can very much be lost. But the decisions are all in your hands. Sometimes, literally.
Burning up for you.
Reaching December in Persona 4 Golden is a critical part in the adventure. This determines whether or not you and your friends attain the truth. The time comes where you must deduce who's been responsible for the murders plaguing Yasuo Inaba, and after sorting things out, you realize it has to be your friend Adachi. This man who you've spent so much time with, at the mall, in your home, and around your closest relatives. A man who struggled alongside your uncle on the police force. He's truly a disgusting person. But what if you find yourself thinking, many people have a disgusting side? What if you think, hey, my other friends were also deplorable in their own rights? And eventually, this train of thought leads you to believe that the right choice here is leniency. You know, to a degree, we did show leniency to all the rest in some capacity. Could it be that different this time? What if cognitive dissonance alone doesn't even allow you to see Adachi as the serial killer? Well, you betray everyone. The single piece of evidence that could have linked Adachi to all of the murders. Those letters he sent you at the Dojima residence. Forensics very well could have used this as evidence as the silver bullet to convict him in this case. Alas, in a moment of weakness you decide to shield your eyes from the truth, and burned it. This scene is so scary because it comes from the very human response of not wanting to see the worst in someone. But in this you've committed a far greater evil. You see, this isn't just covering up for Adachi, it's a complete insult to the investigation team. It puts everyone's efforts for naught. A spit in the face to any loved one seeking closure, and worst of all, a shake and a kick to the graves of everyone that lost their lives in these senseless acts of murder. And rest assured, after making a horrific choice, you will suffer a horrific consequence. After burning the letter, Adachi issues you a warning. If you see his phone number, you'd best pick it up. He reminds you that there's no point in attempting to go off the grid, because with his resources as a police officer, it would take little to no effort at all to find you, no matter where you are. You may try to hide, but good luck. The final shot of Adachi watching you from the outside of the train reminds you of his eye forever watching you now. It would also be a good time to remind you that abandoning your mission lets the fog set in permanently. And when the fog comes to stay, and the shadows arise, well, I don't think I need to tell you twice what that would lead to.
Entire town, it's filled with shadows. I can't.
Familiar faces.
You and the Phantom Thieves have once again overcome unfathomable odds. You've pushed your way through the metaverse, conquering jails and stealing the desires of corrupted hearts once again. Then, you find yourself face to face with a false god. Once again. You see, the demiurge has countless links to the singularity. It's a very forthcoming and blatant allegory for atomization due to technology like phones, social media. Note the giant screen it holds over its head. This stuff alone is certainly unnerving and definitely strikes a chord with what we see day to day in the real world. We truly do see it every day. However, I would say that there's nothing innately horrific or scary about the demiurge itself in terms of design, setting, or anything like that. What's disturbing about the demiurge is the implication of its existence. In my opinion, the sheer existence of the demiurge is what's truly terrifying. Let's look at his design, side by side with the final boss of Persona 5. Angelic wings, multiple arms, enormous size. It's no coincidence, but after I'd completed the fight, it all hit me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, Yaldabaoth may have been right. You see, in a way, he's completely correct because he's immortal. You see, Yaldabaoth wasn't simply this omnipotent god that was there along humanity since the dawn of man. It was simple. He was always forged from humans' desires to relinquish control, so that way they wouldn't have to think, they wouldn't need to suffer. Oh, we're doing this dance. Again and again and again. And it goes beyond Persona 5 strikers and Persona 5. I mean, Izanami told us the fog was the result of humans not wanting to see the world for what it is. They preferred a world submerged in fog, free of complications and struggle. And if you want to go even further back, Nyx told us herself we all wished for oblivion. This is all going on in circles, don't you see? The demiurge is most mortifying because after seeing him look so one-to-one with Yaldabaoth, did the cycle click with me. The cycle doesn't end, the conflict won't ever conclude anytime soon, and I suppose there's nothing to be done. One side inevitably falls, but knowing the principle of existence, we know that the one thing that's promised to us from birth, as humans, is death. Until then, we could only do exactly what we can. No one controls how much time is allotted to them, and at that point, I guess all we could say is,
Memento mori.
something tells me there's no need for formalities anymore. Let's get into this.
Who's your daddy?
After traveling what feels like forever, you've finally made it all the way down the 10 layers of Xibalba. You've battled your way through hordes of the last battalion and even cognitive incarnations of aliens. You confront the Führer and are left with one last obstacle. The great father of destruction, Nyarlathotep. One immediate thing that anyone could realize when comparing him to any other final boss in the series is his size being nowhere near as large as anyone comparatively. In terms of scale, just generally, he'd be considered small. Then again, small within the context of all the other entities we've seen. His size is not imposing, but make no mistake, they spared no detail in making sure that his design is nothing short of disturbing. For one, the face on his main body that he wears is the face of June's father, your party member. Assuming you're privy to the nature of their dynamic, you would know that it's very harsh. I mean, June could be on the verge of a mental breakdown just at the sheer mention of his father. He could hardly process even the memories within a flashback. When he loses control of his ambitions, it's very clear what he's capable of under the wrong influence. It's already disturbing that Nyarlathotep is composed of multiple bodies, but in his key art, these bodies give more detail, and they reveal these aren't merely just some unnamed corpses or generic placeholder stock bodies. Each body was carefully crafted to imitate every father of everyone in the party. I believe I only remember discovering this when I had seen that it was Mr. Silverman hanging off the end. During my initial playthrough, I honestly didn't even notice this. The sprite work I guess couldn't communicate this sort of thing, so when I was browsing around through key art, eventually I just noticed him. I thought it a very interesting detail to utilize the fathers in this way because in the story, a lot of the characters do have a strained relationship with their paternal figure. But no matter the strain you have with any of your loved ones, it would truly be horrible to see them in this state at all. Even though it's not one-to-one, no sane person would want to see an incarnation of anyone that they care about in a state like this. Their likeness bent to the will of a demon that's using them directly to torment you and attack you. Certain attacks will have dialogue where they directly try to agitate the party members, reminding them of their past. And almost as if it was a cruel joke, even though he's by far the smallest entity in terms of size compared to the other gods, he just so happens to be the most powerful. You see, even after your trivial physical battle with him, he doesn't lose. As fate would have it, he destroys the world right before you, in front of everyone. After all of your and your team's trials and all of your tribulations, he just destroys it. Philemon, in the nick of time, proposes a new solution. His proposition ends up being birthing a new timeline. The only issue is that the price of admission is everything. Your past, in addition to your memories. Mind you, within all of this, one of your party members has been fatally wounded. The scene really gives us zero room to breathe. It's all just so shocking and scary. You know, I emphasized in my first video that Nyx was eerie due to being a force of nature. Gnarly though, he's truly horrifying too, but just on the total opposite end of the spectrum. He's as spiteful as any other hateful human. With him, everything is personal. His actions are deliberate. They pinpoint each person's weaknesses and they aim and they strike true. He's quite simply what happens if you were to give an evil human the power of the gods. A recipe that he himself knows guarantees pure chaos. This invisible force of power that he commands, we give him. He is humanity's shadow, and none of us can roam this earth without one. Just remember that Nyarlathotep was able to handily destroy humanity. While humanity was fighting its greatest battle against its greatest threat, Nyarlathotep was simply playing a betting game.
Thinking of you.
In the conclusion of episode 1 in this series, we ended our initial discussion talking about his sacrifice. We come to find that a while after his passing, Seas must reassemble to investigate and destroy the Abyss that now holds real estate beneath Iwatodai Dorm. After gaining a new ally in Metis, you and the team descend deeper and deeper into the Abyss, individually seeing memories of the past. These memories held everyone's reasons, the pivotal shifts for each party member where they awaken to a persona, the moment they unlocked the power of the heart. When we attain Aegis's reason, only then does a more clear picture become visible to us. This dark specter you've caught glimpses of, lurking around the abyss as you trekked downward, finally decides near the bottom that it's time to show themselves. The abyss of time not disappearing along with the cesspool of monstrous shadows that are all around are all the result of the party not being able to cope with their tremendous loss. The loss they suffered at the cost of their so-called victory against Nyx. All of these emotions pouring from everyone's essence has given form to this almost nightmarish rendition of him. All of the longing, all of the regret, and every time they wished, I just wish we had a little more time with him, forged this monster. But even with him being depicted in such an eerie state, there's still so much heartbreak in what's basically a fight where you basically bury him again. It's pretty harsh. The surrounding area being reminiscent of a desert always made me think the atmosphere is very reminiscent of almost like a mausoleum, as if we were confronting him in like a desolate tomb. It's honestly all directed brilliantly and effective in making me a bit sad and very uncomfortable. I mean, the role that we have to play to break the chains that are holding Seas down from fully moving on, it's just a lot. But I will say, something that's truly understated and brilliant is that the Abyss is sectored directly beneath Iwatodai Dorm. And if you remember, that's the place where he and we spent the last year of his life the longest. I would say that there's no better fitting place to put this monster to rest.
Hikari, live.
Entering Persona Q2's fourth theater is immediately unsettling. I suppose you'd be innately uneasy just going off the fact that so late into your adventure, you're in a world that looks like a child's picture book. Had it been the first film, I doubt that anyone would have even batted an eye at this. The trope of grassy green fields, smiling flowers. We arrive here, and after being around dinosaurs and jungles and futuristic cyber worlds, you on a subconscious level know that something's up. And almost immediately, with zero time to get your bearings, this plays out. an anthem lambasting and denouncing Hikari as an individual. The song reads as a plea from Hikari for her desire just to assimilate and conform to social norms. All of this just not to feel rejected or hurt anymore. It's also heartbreaking because I'm sure for countless people, it's a lot more relatable than a lot of other struggles even within the mainline titles. But in contrast to these sad lyrics is a shockingly upbeat and almost joyous in tone performance. It's just all so bombastic. These silly cartoon creatures and the tone of the music is just so jovial, but it feels like a humiliation ritual. The dungeon itself recounts countless events from her life that she ruminates on that has pushed her into quite frankly self-destructive tendencies. Less on the physical end, but more on a mental one. As someone personally who can relate to her passion for the arts, especially in the medium of film, you yourself just want to go in and talk some sense into her and yank her out of it all yourself. But honestly, with how eerie some of these happy-go-lucky creatures seem, I don't think I could even be paid to go anywhere near a world like this. You just never know
who or what is out to get you.
Happily ever after.
If you could undo every misfortune or tragedy from your past, would you? How about if you could erase these things from everyone around you as well? You know, give back to the world. Everyone's problems, you could snap a finger and solve it all. In Persona 5 Royal, Takuto Maruki awakens to these exact abilities, and when he does, he comes to the conclusion that it would be his duty to reshape the world. He finds that he can strip away pain by altering the fabric of reality itself, and using his prior knowledge from his casework at the school, he finds that he can bring back loved ones, alter family dynamics, even fix rapport, and basically grant world peace. The ideal world only has one sacrifice in order for function that's necessary. That sacrifice being to relinquish your past and renounce any of the pain and struggle you've experienced in favor of living in your own personal idealized reality. Pretty awesome, right? I would say for many people, maybe even most people, it would be an incredibly easy price to pay. What if the player protagonist ends up taking Maruki's bargain? Only you and Akechi seem to know what's going on, so naturally a man like this would want to navigate this as peacefully as possible. And if you choose to be peaceful on his terms, well, we all live happily ever after. This all seems great, right? Everyone gets to be a normal high schooler and gets to lead on normal, healthy, and prosperous lives. But did anyone ever really have a choice in all this? You see, Maruki's persona, Azathoth, seemingly has the ability to alter and influence memories. When deciding to resist Maruki's world, you see that it takes some legwork to remind your whole team about the past together. Their memories aren't erased, but very much seemingly buried. But if you don't team up with Akechi in order to resist Maruki's influence, you effectively take it upon yourself to rewrite everyone's life, and in one way I guess one can see that as the ultimate form of revisionist history. This final shot of everyone at LeBlanc together, in my opinion, is the most chilling shot I have experienced throughout the entire franchise. You know, the thing is that it's all so perfect. Yusuke and Futaba horsing around, Morgana finally getting a human body. And believe it or not, it's not very odd at all to see Joker and Akechi friendly. But what does and always will put me off about this picture is that they are the only two looking directly into the camera, directly at the only other person that knows about what went on. The one other person that knows that this reality is a farce held together by a man playing God. The person they're looking at is you. Directly at... So far, I've shared with a lot of you what I find to be horrifying within the Persona series, and I've been very grateful that you guys have stuck with me for the ride. And thanks to the discussion surrounding all of these videos, I realized something. I am far from the only person that's been a bit rattled by this series. And that makes total sense. I am just one guy after all. So today we're going to be looking at some of your stories. Welcome to our first ever user-submitted episode of Horror in Persona.
Turn back now.
Volgan says, I think an honorable mention of Horror in Persona should go to the Okinawa chapter of Persona 5 Strikers. Everything starts out very fine and dandy, but as you progress through it, you realize there's a sense of something very off about the area, especially as you go to investigate the facility that's somehow been closed. Then, things truly go off the rails. After, you decide to try going to a hidden passage, as suddenly the whole population becomes hostile and begins to hunt you down for no reason. And once you finally get into the jail that Sophia finds in order to hide from the populace, you're thrust into a decrepit, decaying laboratory, devoid of life. There are no open areas or structure to the place, just a narrow labyrinth with no rhyme or reason to its layout. And as you piece together what happened, the truth of the jail's rotting existence becomes spine-chilling when you realize that it was the result of the death of its monarch. The place is likely just decaying and withered, no longer supported by whoever created it before. All that's left in this jail are a few types of shadows that roam inside it, a warden no longer bound to protect any sort of deep emotional trauma, and a grotesque, dire shadow. When first experiencing the Okinawa arc in Persona 5 Strikers, I remember how taken aback I was by the fact that this seemingly festive and fun arc took such a dark turn the moment Zenkichi consulted the party at the end of their little beach day. Something about seeing everyday people is way more disturbing than any confrontation with a monster or a normal shadow that you encounter, and I could basically chalk that up to two things. The first and most immediately obvious thing is that outside of the metaverse, the Phantom Thieves are just normal teens. The eerie reality is that without the augmentations their personas give them, they are very much susceptible to being captured, and even worse, as the villagers say, well, they intend to sacrifice them. With their desires being written over, they essentially are just zombies. Except these zombies aren't mindless, they have autonomy and they serve a cult. The second most scary fact here is that had Zenkichi not been there and shared his adult foresight, well, with the RV basically being a sitting duck on this island, these young people would have nowhere to go. After everything they've triumphed over in the past, they would have just died a grisly death at the hand of some villagers. I would also say that the laboratory easily has the most distinct atmosphere in the entire game. It serves as the icing on the cake with such a dark history, and it's quite literally all that's left of its deceased monarch. A monarch that, need I remind you, has passed away never to be seen or witnessed by anyone again. This even reaches to us, the player. We never see his face, and it's assumed that, even in universe, he'll be lost to the annals of time.
Sharing the spotlight.
Master Seal says, Shadow Teddie might have been horrifying, but don't get me started on Mitsuo Kubo. His deadpan, lifeless expression, the fish eyes, his unsettling nature. You were to think Mitsuo was the true villain of Persona 4, until you realize that Adachi is the one responsible for the murderers, and the Shadow World's vicinity. Also, Mitsuo Kubo's shadow looks like a fetus, which is sealed inside an 8-bit knight. It makes him all the more scarier. Though as mentioned above, Mitsuo wasn't the real culprit, as the game presses on to the last couple of months. Isn't there just something so different about Mitsuo Kubo? Solely meant to be a red herring for the murderers, but conventionally he fits the bill on what a stereotypical societal outcast turned serial killer would look like to many of us at a glance. A person so twisted, even his shadow doesn't bother referring to himself as the true self because they may as well be interchangeable. He wears his twisted desires and delusions on his sleeve to the point where his shadow is all anyone sees. His awesome dungeon that's in the style of an old school video game turns from cool to horrifying when you really think about the fact that it takes this form because of his arrested development and delusions. It's truly scary. Not to mention his desperation for attention goes as far as to claim that he's responsible for multiple murders. That's stuff you see in real life. Copycat killers and false claims of admissions have been around forever. It's just rare that you would see any video game take a stab at this topic. You see, to bring it back a bit, the uncomfortable thing about Mitsuo is that he has this quality that I feel has only ever been captured again by Mishima in Persona 5, where he's written to be pathetic in this very sobering and real way, to the point where I think day to day, it's very likely that we pass by these guys, or maybe we even have to interact with some of them. We just don't know it. Something about Kubo just captures the essence of a human, a truly dark human. And compared to a lot of the more larger-than-life styled social links and party members, he's just this thing that exists, and you'll always have him in the back of your mind as that weird part of Persona 4.
Can you hear them?
Unknown user says, in the PS1 version you can hear baby cries in the hospital before the incident. Deva Yuga arranged version, Maki and Kandori were having a nihilistic conversation. I feel it's worth mentioning that the hospital sequence is the inciting incident for the very first Persona Awakening ever. We first lay witness to the aftermath of zombies claiming an elderly man's life shortly after visiting Maki, as she resides in the infamous room number 302. The intensity of the situation lingers far past what's essentially just the game's tutorial battle. The halls you innocently roamed to rather uplifting music is completely flipped on its head and replaced by a truly disturbing track. Muffled voices, unsettling piano keys, screams. Wait, on my way to the 3rd floor, didn't I hear a bunch of babies crying? And it all just leaves you to wonder, what kind of carnage is taking place outside of where we just can't see? Oftentimes what's left unknown could be most terrifying. I want this entry to emphasize one very important thing. Persona is now more popular than ever. It comes with some incredible benefits, but also some downsides. Persona 3 Reload is an amazing title, and it's definitely indicative that we're going to be seeing more and more remakes in the future. We already have 4 on the way. But with Persona seeing so much success, new things will define the franchise. And as a lot of people have noticed, Persona 3 Reload in particular is a bit more sterile than the original. A bit less scary when you hold them up side by side. Though I love the remake, I'll admit something was lost along the way. But I want to emphasize one thing. The first domino on the inciting incident of this very franchise has its roots in horror, and its first domino fell right here in Mikage Hospital. As a quick aside for the Deva Yuga track mentioned in this comment, you should totally check out my last video about Persona 1. I was actually so excited to talk about that topic that I couldn't really wait to put it into this video, and it just ended up being put out last week. So check out my video dedicated to Persona 1 called The Elements of Persona. Hey everyone, I know it's been a while since our last episode of Horror and Persona, but it's the Halloween season. You guys know I wouldn't let this pass without giving my favorite horror RPG franchise a brand new video for the occasion. I hope you all enjoy, so let's get right in.
It follows.
One of the most dreadful feelings known to man is the feeling of being watched. It's hard-coded into our DNA considering the plethora of creatures our ancestors have been hunted by over the course of thousands of years. So it's absolutely no wonder stalker enemies tend to make a really huge impression on us. Even within horror games, where technically everything is already scary, be it through the game's setting or even enemy designs. There really is just something about an enemy that can and will relentlessly hunt you, or that can even just pop up at any time, that really can build this sense of oppression like very few other things do. Even taking something simple like the SAX from Metroid Fusion, no matter how scripted the sequences may be and how limited they are, it's just horrifying. But as many of you know, the Neo Persona games have its very own pursuer enemy that has been the source of countless mysteries, discussion, and definitely grief for players all over the world: the Reaper. Now, I need to open with saying plenty of designs are unsettling within the Persona franchise, especially its demons. So believe me when I tell you, the Reaper is not just scary because of his appearance. It's not just because he dons a tattered black trench. It's not because his mask covers his real face. It's not because he's covered in blood. And it's not because he wields 2 enormous revolvers. It's because if you think you can recklessly grind and level up without a care in the world, neglecting the game's core essence of time management, you can and will be directly punished with this unbelievably powerful shadow prowling after you and your team. If I'm being completely honest, I think hearing his chains clang around in the distance at times is far scarier than when he's in eyesight of you. You just never really quite know if your next turn will even lead you out to the next floor or put you right in his sights. And heaven forbid you don't have any more go-hoems. Yeah, you're pretty much just going to be rolling the dice on survival constantly. Basically narrowly escaping death until your next opportunity to save. From a completely gameplay angle, he's already scary enough. I mean, the dude could steal hours and hours of your progression if you're not careful. And I will say, as a penalty, he's designed pretty much perfectly. I appreciate that he could even follow you between floors, giving him this truly pressing presence. But even aside all of this gameplay stuff, there's just something very off-putting and quite unsettling about his very existence. You see, the Reaper is this entity that seemingly acts independently of everything, no matter what game it appears in. And with its own agency, it seems like its only goal is to kill people. Now, why does it choose to kill people? Well, I guess its name is the Reaper, so that's far from the most pressing question. But what I find truly bizarre is that the Reaper has the ability to seemingly be aligned with people and potentially make contracts with them? Persona 4 the animation has this truly bizarre scene play out. When you and Adachi have their battle, there is something very strange going on that I've scarcely seen people mention. As you and Adachi battle, it seems for some reason the Reaper is fighting alongside Adachi. This alone rings so many alarm bells because across every single Persona game, the Reaper is not even an unlockable persona. No one has control over it. Mind you, even watching this is just a bit odd because the whole time you're also just thinking to yourself, yeah, Adachi parallels Narukami a lot of the time, and it makes sense that he would also potentially be some sort of wild card, but because of his lack of nurtured bonds, he probably never just, awakened to the ability. It's all just so much, and by some unknown method, Adachi is commanding or at least aligning with this creature of mass destruction to do his bidding. I find it significant just for the fact that if Adachi is not in fact controlling the Reaper, it implies that the Reaper of its own volition chooses to align itself with the doom of humanity. And unlike entities like Nyx, that operate as more of a force of nature, the Reaper actively has some sort of bizarre grudge against humanity. Now we have to keep in mind here that not all shadows are innately evil or even hostile for that matter. And when they are, usually at the very least they can be bargained with. But the Reaper defies all of that. It says nothing, it relentlessly pursues its violent nature and hunts down humans, and after the deed is done, let's say he kills everyone. What happens? Who knows? Is it really just a powerful shadow? Maybe, maybe not. But the truth is, we don't know.
Tick tock.
I truly feel like the Dark Hour is often immediately associated with Tartarus, for most people at least. And naturally so, because Tartarus is one of the most contentious parts of Persona 3 as a whole. It's grueling and at times tedious, but if you ask me, it's part of the journey. When I personally hear the Dark Hour, I don't first think of Tartarus. I think way back to the very start of our journey. Our very first trip to the Iwatodai dorm. So get this. You're on a train to a place that we as the player don't know yet. Seems our main character's enjoying some tunes when all of a sudden, it's all just so imposing. The electronics losing their power, the sky turning green, an unmoving clock with not a single click, and our very first greeting while exiting the train station is a set of coffins, strewn about with pools of blood for good measure. It's all so otherworldly and grungy. The sight is just grisly, to be frank. And as gripping as the set piece is, it's not the part that necessarily got my attention the most the first time I watched this scene. What's always fascinated me about this scene is the reaction of our main character. Or should I say, lack of reaction from our main character. You know, I understand it's a video game, but truly think about this. Any person, fictional or otherwise, would naturally be kind of freaked out by all of this. At a minimum, show some fear for their life, maybe show some pensiveness to proceed onward, and at the opposite end of the spectrum, completely freak out and lose their shit. Rightfully so, I may add. But against all odds, rather than showing any level of fear or discomfort, Makoto simply leisurely strolls along to the dorm with seemingly no sense of self-preservation or even urgency. Now, I personally have heard a handful of theories surrounding this. Some admittedly will just chalk it up to poor narrative presentation as a way to make our super cool protagonist look like he's not some punk that's gonna be, threatened by anything. A way to show that he's some sort of hard ass in the face of it all, no matter what. But others would argue something pretty interesting. They would argue that his reaction makes plenty of sense from a narrative perspective, considering what we learned of Makoto's link to, death itself. His reaction itself displaying an unwavering fear of death, as his soul is, binded to an entity removed from humanity. The most absolute form of death itself. It's very reminiscent of another certain protagonist from another series we may have to discuss one day. However, on the subject of Makoto's reaction, personally, I believe it could go either way. Maybe it really was brilliant foreshadowing from Atlas that was a truly meticulous setup for a story reveal for this JRPG protagonist. But I can also admit, it may be just as likely that this might be a Silent Hill 2 kind of, happy accident, where the character's uncanny behaviors and mannerisms simply add to this mysterious, otherworldly, bizarre, but admittedly very memorable horror.